Okay. Okay, thanks everyone for joining us this afternoon. This is session number 6 in a climate webinar series, and today we've invited Louise Gavin to come and join us from Remarkable NRM to talk about carbon farming. I've got a little bit of a bio here. So Louise has worked with land managers in NRM for several years, for about 2007. She's worked across Queensland at a national level and in South Australia. In the last 4 years, she's been working closely with the LRF, NRM, Regions Queensland and Queensland Farmers Federation to run various workshops to help landholders get into carbon farming. And she's pulled together various resources, including a carbon farming resource handbook, which and various fact sheets as well, to provide to landholders who want more information about how to make informed decisions about participating in the carbon market. So she also works with a community of practice network made up of NRM and key agricultural industry staff to enable them to share and access information they need to work with landholders. So she's got lots of information. She thinks she's not an expert, but she probably knows a lot more than we do. So we've asked her to come and just basically give us the basics to start with. And I'll hand over to you, Louise. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Elaine. That's great. It does make me sound great, doesn't it? Thank you. All right, so I will give you a bit of a carbon 101, but really try and focus on things that you can do and talk with landholders about. So that's really my experience that I've had, just trying to get the carbon messages across to landholders that you're working with. So let's give it a bit of a start. So some bits I've written some notes and I'll read them to make sure I actually cover some information, but some I'll just sort of go with the flow, and feel free to ask questions at the end. So really, carbon farming is either storing carbon or avoiding the release of greenhouse gases. So today I'm going to focus on the land sector. There are lots of carbon farming methods that are available, and some of them are not for the land sector. So we're focusing, as we're NRM service providers essentially, we'll focus on the methods that are useful in the land sector. So carbon farming uses legislated methods, and so those methods basically follow an act that was in place in 2011, and that act means that you can trade Australian carbon credit units. So for short, they are well known in the area as ACCUs. So they are a financial tradable product. And all carbon farming products must follow an approved ERF method, so emissions reduction fund method. And the emissions reduction fund method is basically the Commonwealth's project. So the methods basically explain how you carry out a carbon farming project, and they measure the reduction in emissions. So like anything in primary production, you can work all this out yourself, you can learn it all, you can have all the information, and you can do all of this yourself, or you can pay someone else who has the specialist knowledge. So there are carbon service providers within the industry that can give you that information and can help you out. So my next little slide is a little bit of fun. I just need to get on the screen.
This man right here is my great grandfather. He's the first cat herder in our family. Don't let anybody tell you it's easy. Anybody can herd cattle. Holding together 10,000 half-wild short hairs, that's another thing altogether. Being a cat herder is probably about the toughest thing I think I've ever done.
I got this one this morning, right here. And if you look at his face, it's just ripped to shreds, you know. see the movies, you hear the stories. I'm living a dream. Not everyone can do what we do. I wouldn't do nothing else. It ain't an easy job, but when you bring the herd into town and you ain't up to one of them, ain't a feeling like in the world.
All right, sorry, just a little bit of fun. But really, our carbon service providers are the equivalent of having agronomists or other people in your ag industries. So really, there are people who know what they're doing, and landholders don't need to know everything, and neither do we as people who are supporting the landholders. So for some people who are working in NRM field, you probably have to know a million things, but you don't have to know everything well. You do need to know where to help your landholders source the information. So whichever type of landholder you're working with, you don't have to know all the information, but yeah, there are people that you can go to. So there is an industry code of conduct, and you can look on the Carbon Market Institute, so the CMI website, and you can see who has signed up to that code of conduct, and then you've got something to go for. So if landholders are asking you who you would go with as a service provider for anything about carbon, go to an industry standard, go to someone who's signed up for it, and start from there, because they're already basically to a level of accreditation. So yeah, so it just gives it a little bit of a standard. Okay, so my next slide now is a little bit about methods. So I am not going to tell you about all of the methods. That would be more than a half an hour webinar. But I've put that there for you to see. These are basically the land sector methods that are more relevant to far north Queensland. Now I can see you'd be looking at and going, irrigated cotton. There's a reason I've put that there. So I'll just go through them a little bit so you can understand. So there's a couple for beef. So herd improvement, you may have landholders that have been through various programs that you might have done, soil improvement programs. I know Terrain has done various soil health programs. You may have people who've gone through like the RCS, Rural Consulting Services. They might have gone through one of the RCS programs or anything like that where they have changed their herd management practice. So essentially that's what that methodology is about. When you're going to do some carbon farming, you need to have not started a project, so you need to start from somewhere. So lots of people who have done some of those programs, they've often started down that track. But yeah, it's best to just get in straight away if you think you want to do something, and start from the carbon farming. Yeah, start at a carbon farming spot and then make your changes from there. There's a methodology about feeding nitrates to cattle, and so that changes the gut flora and things like that to change the emissions profile. There's a few soil carbon methods. They all follow a really prescriptive way of doing something, and so you'll need to get an approved depth of how you core, all of those sorts of things for the soil carbon methods. I've put the irrigated cotton one there because for lots of the horticultural enterprises up in far north Queensland, that's probably going to be our closest starting point for actually being able to do something in the carbon farming space. So yes, you could do something now, but really they're looking at basing a new method for horticulture based on the irrigated cotton method. So that's basically the space to look at. You would know there's a lot of dairy industry around here, so destruction of methane. So methane's obviously very high greenhouse gas. So working out how to destroy that in a more environmentally friendly way is what that method's about. There's a dietary additives one for that. And then the main sort of thing that you're probably thinking about, that you hear things about, would be the vegetation methods. So there are quite a few vegetation methods. There's reforestation, there's revegetation, and there's protecting native forests. So the ones that you probably hear about are HIR, if you've ever heard of any of these methods. So human-induced regeneration. So lots of that. I'll show a slide in a moment about where some of these projects are. So lots of the human-induced regen projects are in southeast Queensland. And there's lots about the fact that they have the right to clear their land and to stop the thickening scrub. And by undertaking a carbon project, those landholders saying, okay, I have the right to clear this land, to use it for grazing, and I want to get rid of all this scrub, but I'm not going to do that. And so by starting up a carbon farming project, then these properties have then said, all right, I'm not going to destroy the vegetation, essentially. So there's a few methods there. Blue carbon is a very new carbon farming method. It's really about, like in a two-sentence thing, it's really about protecting areas of mangroves, but also restoring tidal flows, because the mangroves are obviously vegetation and they help to break down any of the toxic gases as well. And then there's a couple of savanna fire management ones. So that's not everywhere in Australia. It is only in the savanna regions in Northern Australia. So across from Northern Queensland, the Territory and Northern WA. And those, I'll flick to the next slide so you can see where they actually are. Those projects, the orange ones there. So those projects really are, lots of the properties were burning anyway, and they were, some may have been burning, patch burning, but some wildfires, it just happens in the summer storm season, fires happen. So what the aim is for the savanna burning methods really is about trying to get people to do cooler burns or to patch burn. And by doing that, it completely changes the emissions profile. So it changes from being more toxic gases to less toxic greenhouse gases. And so that's an avoided emission. And so one of the other methods is also taking into account the woody scrub that's on the ground. So they're the main sort of methods that you may hear about, or that would be a bit relevant to areas up here. So basically any carbon farming projects must follow an approved method to generate the ACCUs. And so people will go accordingly. So if you have a look at that map, the HIR, so the human-induced regen projects, you can see those in the blue. The black ones have been revoked, so they may have retired, like so they may have just pulled out or changed. Basically, they could have changed their method. So I don't know if some of those savanna burning ones have changed to be the newer savanna burning method. So yeah, so it's not that the world is ending and they're not doing them anymore. It just could be that they've changed. I don't know, but yeah, that gives you a bit of an indication. And I just need to make my slides keep moving. So good. And so just to give you a bit of an indication of what's happening and a little bit closer level, So you can find out as much information as you would like by basically, I'll give you the link to this site at the end, but by going on to the Clean Energy Regulator site, so that's the Australian government site, go on there and then you can have a look and see where the projects are. So I've just gone on there and looked up registered projects, and you can click on just Queensland. You can click on whether you want to know which registered projects are for savanna burning or which ones are for reforestation, afforestation, whichever type of method you like, you can click on that and it will give you more information, and you can zoom in and out. And so I've just zoomed and done a screenshot there for you, but just so you can see that there are projects existing already. There's obviously not many, there are heaps more everywhere else, but yeah, having smaller property sizes would be a little bit of an issue there. So yeah, but just gives you a bit of indication. So then I just alluded to that in saying smaller property sizes. So there's lots of things that will definitely impact on project viability. And so you could, it's pretty much the same as any other agricultural business. So you need to basically, if you're out now talking with landholders and they're asking you about carbon farming, you can ask them a few key questions basically. So really, if someone came to you and said, oh, should I get into it? Well, basically, if they want to do anything with their beef cattle or bananas, if we just take two examples, what's the cost of production for your beef cattle? What's the cost of production per hectare for having bananas? What's the cost of your infrastructure for having that business? What's your financial position for your business? Think about your business or family considerations that you may have, your seasonal outlook, thinking about climate change and what that will mean for what you're able to do in the future. And it does really make a big difference of what you want what your landholder wants their business enterprise to be. There's no point in doing something that you don't love. A lot of landholders are there because they love what they do. They work pretty hard, but they do it because they love what they do. So if they're not going to enjoy this, there's no point. Yeah, there's no point in doing it. So they're the same sorts of questions that you'd ask about any business. And they're all based on the presumption that you can actually do a carbon farming project. So you need to think about that there's a method that you can legally do where you are. So you have to, if you go on to that Commonwealth site that I said, there's a few questions there, and it definitely takes you through things that, do you have a legal right to do it? So yeah, so then moving a little bit into what you've probably heard bits and pieces around about. So the Land Restoration Fund is a Queensland government program. So the Queensland government has basically invested $500 million to expand carbon farming in the state. So that's quite a serious investment. They've actually just announced, I'm just trying to find the number, they've just announced another $35 million for a new natural capital fund. So they're moving with the changes that are happening around, and so they've just announced another investment. So basically the Land Restoration Fund will fund projects that are Queensland based, and they are looking for a premium market. So the Australian government will give you lowest price for your carbon as a landholder. The Land Restoration Fund, the Queensland government, is looking to offer the landholders a premium price in the market. So in order to get that premium, they are basically saying that you need to deliver a carbon farming project, and it needs to be one of the Australian government approved methods. But then on top of that, you need to show that you've got some other benefits. And so they're calling them their LRF co-benefits, so Land Restoration Fund co-benefits. And the co-benefits that they are looking for are socioeconomic, First Nations, and environmental co-benefits. And so hence my little pickies there, because they're looking to support projects. So if a landholder wants to do a project and they say, actually, it's just going to cost too much to do all the setup of the project for the small return that I'm going to get from the Australian government. And really, the Land Restoration Fund is acknowledging that and saying, all right, but if you can do some things to protect our Queensland environment, our Queensland communities, our Queensland First Nations people, and you can do something to positively influence these areas, then we want to pay you more for that. So really, if you've got a threatened ecosystem on a block, if there's something that you can, for instance, you might have a really good employment program that you can work with a local Indigenous group or prescribed body corporate. You might want, like a landholder might want to work with one of those groups and say, all right, we want to have some employment, we want to have your input, we want to understand how this land used to be, we want to make it better, we want to, yeah, anything like that. So you can incorporate these other co-benefits, and then the Land Restoration Fund will say, yeah, that's actually really worth it for us, and we want to pay you more for it. So I just wrote down a couple of examples that I've seen that the Land Restoration Fund has had. So they've had, so if you had a project involving avoided clearing of the native regrowth and the HIR projects that I was telling you about, you could have LRF co-benefits of Great Barrier Reef, because that's a priority of theirs, threatened ecosystems, threatened wildlife, native vegetation, diversity and human rights, employment and skills, resilience, connectivity. So there's heaps of things that you can actually list and say, yes, this is worth it for us. So that's where the Land Restoration Fund is coming from. So, so generating credits, you can actually generate carbon credits that are not ACCUs. So there are different mechanisms. It's not only the Australian government and the Queensland government that are doing it. There's other industry bodies that are doing this too. So if you generate something that's not an ACCU, but it still can be a carbon credit, they have different, like those different mechanisms have different requirements. So as a very basic understanding kind of example, you can produce beef, so you can produce carbon. So you can produce beef, or you can produce halal beef. If you want to produce the halal beef, you need to follow these certain standards, and you're aiming for a particular market to do that. So that's the same with the carbon market. If you want to produce carbon credits for the Land Restoration Fund, you need to follow the Australian government and the Queensland government's methods and guidelines. So same sort of thing. So some things for landholders to consider. Have a look at the property size and the business. Compare the costs and the benefits of different projects and how they fit with the current business. Before signing any contracts or agreements, seek non-biased professional, legal and financial advice. That is so important. So it is okay if you go and ask a carbon service provider for advice. They will tell you what they think, and they will do a very good job of it, as long as you've gone to someone who's on the code of conduct. They will do a very good job of it, because that is their business. They know it very well, but it may not be unbiased. So get your information and then talk to more than one. So basically, if you're talking to your landholders, get them to talk to more than one person about this, and talk to their accountants. It is a financial, tradable product. You need to have financial advice. And more firms are now getting, and banks as well, getting up with carbon farming. So yeah, so that's getting easier to do that. Shop around before committing. It's been tricky up till now to be able to shop around well, because if a carbon service provider goes to a landholder, have I got a great deal for you? And they don't even need to be shonky. They can be very well-meaning and be great about what they're doing. But if you don't know any different, you don't know if you're being taken for a ride as a landholder. So really shop around. You don't go to one shop and buy one car and don't ask about anything else. You go and you look around, you go for different brands, you go to different dealerships, you work out what you want, and then you go to the person you trust the most. And that's, to me, seems the same for carbon farming. And a little point too is that landholders don't just need to take all the risk. There are definitely service providers, and some bigger service providers, that will share the risk of project delivery. So a few resources that you may need to look at yourself, or that you can point landholders in the direction of. A little shameless plug for myself there at the bottom, but I actually do have the resources that I've done. So my little carbon farming handbook, I've got that on there, and a few of the fact sheets that I've done as well. So the Clean Energy Regulator, that's the Australian government. There are so many resources there. It is a bit hard to navigate, but if you think you know what you want, you can actually type that into the search engine on that site, and it will help you out. The Land Restoration Fund, and then there's a carbon calculator, the Look-See tool. It's actually got a biodiversity one too, and I haven't played with that one. It's a Look-Be. But the Look-See tool, I have played with that with other landholders, and I've since sent a local landholder here to actually map out his property, and it'll give you a bit of a calculator. It just gives you a little bit of an idea of how much carbon you might be able to sequester. So there, I'm about to shift that slide, so if you need to take a photo of it, do that one. And yeah, so they're some of the resources that are probably most useful to start you off. And that's me pretty much done. I'm happy to be contacted. Probably more to help you get in touch with other people. So yeah, I'll do the stop sharing so that I don't have to look at that anymore.
Fantastic. Thank you, Louise. That was really good and very useful. I did actually learn some things. I understood it. So thank you for that.
Great.
Has anybody got any questions they'd like to ask?
Easy questions, obviously.
Maybe put your little hand thing up when you've got. I've got one question I'd like to ask actually, but if anybody else has got a question, just put your little handy sign up. My question is this, Louise. Obviously, carbon farming is not as successful, should we say, in the wet tropics as in other areas of the country. It's not as popular or whatever. What are the reasons for that?
A little bit of it is about the land size, as I alluded to earlier. So to do a huge carbon farming project, it almost costs, well, not the same, but the costs are there as they are for a very small property. So a block in Yungaburra that has some beef cattle and they want to re-veg the block and get out of carbon farming and sell all their cattle, not that they need to sell cattle, you can have both together, but they will still have something like a 10 grand auditing cost. They will still have project management expenses themselves and time expenses, as well as getting an expert to help them. They'll still have all of those sorts of costs, whether it is for a 3 hectare block or thousands of hectares. So that's definitely, cost is a definite reason that's prohibitive at this point, I would say. Gee, I know you've done a lot of work in this area. Is there anything else that you wanted to add to that? Because I know you have spoken to a lot of landholders around in our area.
Sorry, just getting the mute off. I think, yes, there's some issues with cost. I think there's some issues with trust as well. I think, you know, I remember one person saying for any market to work, there needs to be some certainty about the market, and I think there's a lot of uncertainty in the carbon market, and I think that's definitely one of the big blocks.
Yeah.
So if that's the case, so what are the biggest opportunities for landholders in the wet tropics then, do you think, as far as carbon farming is concerned?
Yeah, so hopefully there will be a method that helps the horticultural enterprises get something going. And I'm not saying get out of horticulture. I'm just hoping that there are areas already basically that that are not being used well on lots of people's properties. So that would be the case for people who have a creek or a river. They often will just put a few trees and re-veg those areas. There's definitely scope for people to do something like that. If they're already not sending their cattle down a steep slope, well, there's areas to re-veg those. There's areas, coastal areas perhaps, that can be looked at for the blue carbon methodologies. So if people, if there are bunded wetland areas, that people can allow that tidal flow to come back and start thinking about areas like that. So there are a lot of properties that would have a triangle here and there that they don't use for whichever agricultural enterprise. There's definitely scope for putting some re-veg in there, but at the moment that's not really worth it in terms of making money from carbon. It's worth it for a good biodiversity impact. It's worth it for the soil impact. It's worth it for the condition of your water, for the Great Barrier Reef. There's so many good things, obviously, that are worth doing it for. But at the moment, it's not making enough money for carbon. And so it might be a matter of working out how to join a few projects together. I probably live in a dreamland of having an industry like a sugar industry or whatever, joining properties together. They already work in co-op kind of ways, but joining industries together and helping them to have one project across. So that definitely happens with other methods. So they've tried that with the beef herd methodology in the Gulf region, in Southern Gulf. They worked out with that. It still wasn't quite right, and so there's still a lot of scope to have aggregation work a lot better. But yeah, it's still developing. my thoughts though in saying, oh, okay, it's not actually worth it for everyone yet, is if you don't know this stuff now, there's too much of it to learn later when it probably is worth it. So I think it's getting landholders on board now to have that base level understanding and to know, okay, price point, this is it. When it gets to this, it's worth doing it for me. It might also help them have that little bit further trust in the industry as well. I know the Australian government has got all that safeguarding stuff. The reason there's such high auditing costs is because the things you need to do to have a project with the Australian government and Queensland government, there's a lot of things you need to do. Part of that is to get some trust in the industry. So there's definitely things that are getting worked through at the moment, and it's not perfect.
No. Okay. All right. Next question, Councillor Milton. If you want to put your video on and turn your mute off and ask your question.
Hey, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry, but the video is not going on. It just came in out of the paddock.
Okay.
I have a question in regards to the Land Restoration Fund. So I apologise, I was a little bit late. I missed the very first part of the presentation. I sort of just came in at the end, actually. And when you were talking about that, and you mentioned that there was 500 million plus whatever it is, is that to help farmers and others to do these carbon projects? Is that what you're saying?
So they invested a couple of years ago now. So they've said that's our investment. So they've put the money in, and it is to help projects get up and running. It's also their community engagement, essentially. So they're helping people learn more about it. It's helping projects, some pilot projects, it's funding that. So it's the whole big program, every part of their program that's coming out of it. And so any resources that they produce, any pilot projects, and their aim is that they have a self-funding program. And so they're not going to aim, so their aim is that they're not going to have to just keep saying, all right, we need another million, we need another whatever million. The aim is once their program is up and running, it's a continual program, and it invests in itself. So that's the aim. Like $500 million is obviously a lot, but it's the land sector projects. But yeah, so it's the overall overarching program. Yeah.
So an individual farmer could apply for a grant from the Land Restoration Fund to do something that comes under the guidelines of carbon, sequestration or whatever it is. So
sequestration, yeah.
So that's the word. Sorry, I'm a bit tired. So is there any recognition of particularly your lowland sclerophyll, and I think I got that word right, dry forest or whatever they call it. A lot of that, especially in the lower part of the Hinchinbrook Shire and the southern part of the Hinchinbrook Shire, it's not really rainforest. It's been that lowland dry, the dry sort of forest, and it was always open forest. However, it's thickening very quickly, and I believe it's all mahogany glider country habitat. So I believe that it's not good for the mahogany glider for that timber thickening. Is there any possibility with that to go in there and clear up the undergrowth and tidy it up a bit? Is there anything to stop it from becoming rainforest? Is that a project you can do? Did I spit that out? Eventually?
Yeah, that's a very weird thing. I want to stop rainforest. I know what you're saying, though.
There are different types of, rainforest is not the only forest. They're open forest and all that.
So the Land Restoration Fund has a couple of clear points of where they have investment rounds, and so they don't have grants as such. I know they don't call them a grant. so they've had 2 investment rounds, and I think the investment round goes on the government announcing, and so the Queensland government ready to announce a funding round. So I obviously don't know that when or if for sure that they're going to have any more rounds, but it is definitely their intention to have more rounds, of having more investment rounds. So yes, people, when they have a round open, people can apply, can say, yes, this is the sort of project I'd like to do, and this is the way I'm going to do it. So if there is a methodology that suits that, and then you could definitely say you are enhancing the mahogany glider habitat, like that would be something that would definitely suit in their style of project, unless they completely change their priorities. That would be something that would suit the Land Restoration Fund, but it would be about finding the right method for carbon farming. So that's actually your tricky thing, because carbon farming is about storing more carbon, and if you are removing trees, you're not storing more carbon. So you'd have to find the right method for that. Yeah. That would be
and who can give you that information? Who can help you with that? It's is there somebody has those abilities that can, you can talk to and find out how to do it?
Yeah, so there would be, so there's a few carbon service providers, and a few would work in more your Hinchinbrook area. Yeah, so I'm a bit hesitant to say one over another when I'm particularly talking to someone. Yeah, it is a bit tricky.
They are out there. You can get that information from someone.
Yes,
it is
yes.
out there.
So go onto the CMI website, although it's not working today, just today for some weird reason. But go onto the Carbon Market Institute website and have a look for the Industry Code of Conduct, and look up who's a signatory to that, and then just basically have a look at a few of those, and then I would actually go on to so this is doing your own research properly. I'll then go on to the Australian government website, have a look at the projects register, have a look and zoom right in all around Hinchinbrook area, north and south, and have a look which carbon company is supporting landholders to do vegetation projects. Make sure they're on the code, they're signed up to the Code of Conduct, and then approach one or two of those. That would be my best way. And so I'm saying this now, anyone can do this for whichever project you'd like to do. So then you're kind of having a look at who else has already got something going, who else is working in this. Because when I first started in this area, I rang a few carbon service providers and I said, yeah, we'll do this. But I know there are a few who are really good at soil carbon, and there are a few who are really good at savanna burning, and some that will do vegetation. So they're starting now to have their specialist areas. And I don't actually want to say one over another, because
that's fine. I can look that up, and I'm sure that other people could too as well.
Yeah, cool.
Thanks for that.
No worries.
Very informative. Thank you.
Has anybody else got any questions before we finish? No, I don't think so. I think that's the end. Well, thanks again, Louise. That was really good. It was a really good presentation, and I think that hit the mark, gave us all the basics that we're all looking for. So I really appreciate you coming along. Thank you for everybody else for joining us today as well. And that's the end. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you.
Stop